Hello, can I ask you why you're not wearing a seatbelt?
Good afternoon.
Are you going back to work now?
No, I'm going home now.
The smoke permeates the whole cabin. It's bad for the smokers.
Imagine cruising down the highway without a seatbelt, smoking on an airplane, or letting your kids roam the neighborhood unsupervised until sunset. Sounds wild, right? Yet, in the 1970s, these were everyday norms. Fast forward to today, and many of these once common activities are now outright illegal. So, join us to explore the 25 things illegal today, but were completely normal in the 1970s. Back in the 1970s, it wasn't unusual for kids to ride in the trunk of a car or the open bed of a pickup truck, especially on road trips or when there were too many passengers for available seats. Parents often saw it as a fun, adventurous experience rather than a safety hazard. Some kids even turned the trunk into a cozy little hideout with blankets and snacks. Pickup truck beds doubled as makeshift seating areas, offering an open-air thrill that kids loved. Seatbelt laws were either non-existent or rarely enforced, and child safety regulations were far less strict. Today, such practices are considered reckless endangerment, carrying hefty fines and legal consequences. Modern laws strictly require all passengers, especially children, to be secured in proper car seats or seat belts at all times. Fireworks weren't just for outdoor celebrations. They often made their way into indoor parties, creating a chaotic mix of excitement and danger.
Set it on fire, turn the lights off, and pretend we're excited. Ready? Woo!
People would light sparklers in living rooms, set off Roman candles in basements, and even launch small firecrackers inside for fun. Birthday parties, New Year's celebrations, and even casual gatherings saw fireworks being used recklessly without much concern for fire hazards or injuries. Smoke-filled rooms, scorched furniture, and occasional burns were just part of the fun. Fire codes were more relaxed and enforcement was minimal. Today, setting off fireworks indoors is strictly illegal due to fire risks, structural damage, and health hazards from smoke inhalation. Fire marshals and local authorities impose heavy fines, and modern safety regulations ensure that fireworks are restricted to controlled outdoor environments. Hitchhiking was a widely accepted and common way to travel, whether for long road trips or just getting across town. Strangers had no hesitation about picking up someone thumbing a ride on the side of the road, and hitchhikers rarely worried about personal safety. It was seen as an adventurous, budget-friendly mode of transportation.
Sorry, I can't take you any further, but this is where I turn off.
That's okay, we'll get you to the lift.
Thanks for the ride.
Okay.
Often associated with the free-spirited hippie culture. Many young travelers relied on hitchhiking for cross-country journeys, sometimes even writing their destinations on cardboard signs. However, rising crime rates, reports of kidnappings, and high-profile serial killer cases in the late 20th century changed public perception.
I'll let you up here.
I'll tell you when to turn, pal. Just keep driving.
Today, hitchhiking is illegal or heavily restricted in many places due to safety concerns, and most people are wary of both offering and accepting rides from strangers. Have you ever brought beer to work? No? In the 1970s, bringing beer to work and drinking it was quite normal, wasn't it? In the 1970s, bringing beer to work, or even having a fully stocked office fridge, wasn't just accepted. It was often encouraged. Many workplaces, from corporate offices to factories, had a casual attitude toward alcohol. Employees would crack open a cold one during lunch breaks, brainstorming sessions, or even while sitting at their desks. Some companies even provided beer as a workplace perk, believing it boosted morale and creativity.
Got him, Bell. Did it again, that son of a gun. I've been winning my life.
Anybody want a beer?
Absolutely. Hey, I'll have one too.
Here.
Okay, everybody at the end too. Come on,
Have you got a light beer there?
Office parties regularly featured alcohol, and after-hours meetings often turned into informal drinking sessions. Drinking on the job wasn't seen as unprofessional unless it affected performance. However, stricter workplace regulations, liability concerns, and changing attitudes toward professionalism led to alcohol bans in most offices. Today, human resources policies prohibit drinking on company premises, and violations can result in serious disciplinary actions or termination. Sending kids to buy cigarettes for their parents was completely normal, and store clerks barely blinked an eye. Children as young as 8 or 9 would walk into a grocery store, hand over some cash, and casually ask for a pack of Marlboros or Camels. No identification card checks, no questions. Just a simple transaction. Many parents even wrote notes authorizing their kids to buy cigarettes, and store owners accepted them without hesitation.
I'm sorry, but I can't sell cigarettes to anyone under the age of 19 because it's the law.
Well, they're not for me, they're for my parents. My mom gave me this list and note, she even signed it.
Cigarette vending machines were also common in restaurants, gas stations, and even schools, allowing minors easy access to tobacco. However, as awareness of smoking-related health risks grew, laws became stricter. Today, selling cigarettes to minors is illegal worldwide, with heavy fines and penalties for violations. Retailers are required to check identification cards, making such childhood errands a thing of the past. Leaving babies alone in strollers outside stores was quite common back then. Why? Let's find out. In the 1970s, it wasn't uncommon for parents to leave their babies in strollers outside stores, cafes, or even at the entrance of supermarkets while they shopped. This practice was particularly common in Europe and parts of the United States, where people believed fresh air was good for babies and crime rates were lower. Parents would park strollers on sidewalks, sometimes even stepping into a restaurant for a meal while their baby napped outside. Strangers often smiled or kept an eye on the baby rather than reporting it as neglect. However, changing social attitudes, increased awareness of child safety, and rising cases of child abductions led to stricter laws. Today, leaving a baby unattended in public, even for a short time, can result in child endangerment charges, social services involvement, and legal consequences. In the 70s, roller skating inside shopping malls was not only common but often encouraged. Many malls had smooth, spacious floors perfect for gliding around, and some even hosted skating events or designated skate nights. Teens and kids zipped through stores, skating between shoppers, and some employees even wore skates to assist customers faster. Mall security was far more relaxed, and businesses saw it as a fun, youthful trend rather than a liability.
The annual Legends Gathering. Hundreds of roller skaters are expected to lace up for events that span 4 glorious days.
However, as malls became more crowded and safety concerns grew, roller skating was banned in most places due to the risk of collisions, injuries, and property damage. Today, anyone attempting to skate inside a mall would be stopped by security immediately, with most establishments enforcing strict no-skating policies to prevent accidents and legal issues. Owning exotic animals like monkeys, alligators, big cats, and even bears was surprisingly common. There were few regulations preventing people from keeping these wild creatures as pets, and many households treated them like regular domesticated animals. Pet stores openly sold monkeys, baby crocodiles, and even venomous snakes to anyone with enough cash. Some people kept lions or tigers in their backyards, inspired by Hollywood's fascination with exotic pets. Roadside attractions often let visitors buy or handle wild animals without any oversight.
If you have a pet, don't keep it indoors all day. Take it out for a walk. No need to feel self-conscious because no one ever stares. At least, not usually.
However, as cases of attacks, escapes, and mistreatment increased, governments introduced strict animal welfare and public safety laws. Today, owning exotic animals requires special permits, extensive enclosures, and strict compliance with wildlife regulations. In most states, unauthorized possession can lead to hefty fines, legal trouble, and confiscation of the animal. Next up, Why were people used to riding a motorcycle without a helmet or even a shirt? Riding a motorcycle without a helmet, or even a shirt, was seen as a symbol of freedom and rebellion. Bikers embraced the wind-in-the-hair experience, often riding in nothing but jeans and sunglasses. Helmets weren't mandatory in many places, and protective gear was considered optional. It was common to see motorcyclists cruising down highways, their long hair flowing, with no concern for head injuries. Many believed helmets ruined the thrill of riding and resisted any attempts at regulation. However, as motorcycle accidents and fatalities surged, states began implementing strict helmet laws. Research shows helmets reduce fatal injuries, leading to widespread enforcement. Today, riding without one is illegal in most states and can result in fines. Shirtless riding, still legal, but not recommended for safety. Setting off firecrackers in your backyard was an everyday thrill, requiring no permits or restrictions. Kids and adults alike could light up fireworks whenever they pleased, whether for holidays, birthdays, or just random fun. Roman candles, bottle rockets, and cherry bombs were common, with neighborhoods often becoming impromptu fireworks shows. Safety precautions were minimal, and injuries, small fires, and singed eyebrows were seen as part of the fun. However, as accidents and property damage increased, strict firework regulations were introduced. Today, many states require permits, designated areas, and specific timeframes for fireworks use. Even legal displays can lead to noise complaints, with neighbors quick to call the authorities at the first loud explosion. In the 70s, selling homemade food was as easy as setting up a table outside your house. No permits, no inspections, and definitely no health codes. Neighborhoods had barbecue stands, taco carts, and kids selling homemade goods like jams and pies, all without oversight. People trusted each other, buying meals from neighbors without concerns about foodborne illnesses, allergens, or sanitation. However, as health concerns and food safety laws became stricter, authorities began cracking down on unregulated food sales. Today, selling homemade food without a license can result in hefty fines. Strict health inspections, permits, and commercial kitchen requirements make it nearly impossible to legally operate a food business from home without proper authorization. Kids riding in the front seat, regardless of age, was completely normal. Car seat laws were nearly non-existent, and many parents didn't even use seatbelts for their children. Babies often rode on a parent's lap. Toddlers stood on the seat to get a better view, and older kids lounged freely without restraints.
What this is suggesting is that it's not just that people are setting up their car seats wrong, which is putting children at risk. It's just that fundamentally the car seats aren't doing much.
Some cars even had bench seats, making it easy for kids to slide around during turns. Airbags weren't a concern since most vehicles didn't have them, and safety research wasn't as advanced. Parents believed their arms were enough to catch a child in case of sudden braking. However, as studies revealed the dangers of front seat riding, strict laws were introduced. Today, kids under a certain age and height are legally required to sit in the back, secured in appropriate car seats or booster seats. But why was it normal to drive after a few drinks without much worry? Let's find out. Driving after a few drinks wasn't considered a major offense. Many saw it as normal, even socially acceptable. Bars and restaurants didn't hesitate to serve patrons who planned to drive home, and "one for the road" was a common phrase. Driving under the influence, DUI, laws technically existed, but enforcement was inconsistent, and breathalyzers were rare.
They're making it laws where you can't drink when you want to. You have to wear a seatbelt when you're driving, and pretty soon we're going to be calm in this country.
Police often let mildly intoxicated drivers off with a warning or a suggestion to drive carefully. Open container laws were also more relaxed, and it wasn't unusual to see drivers with a beer in hand. However, as drunk driving fatalities increased, stricter laws and enforcement followed. In the 1970s, mercury thermometers were a common sight in households and schools, used for measuring body temperature and conducting science experiments. At the time, little concern was given to the dangers of mercury exposure.
I'm going to tell you how to use this mercury thermometer. You see here, it's I don't know what, 3 or 4 inches long. The temperature, you can read it.
If a thermometer broke, children would often play with the shiny mercury droplets, unaware of its toxic effects. However, research revealed the severe health and environmental risks of mercury poisoning. Many countries banned or restricted mercury thermometers. Today, they have been largely replaced by digital and alcohol-based alternatives. What was once a standard household item is now considered hazardous, with strict regulations in place to prevent mercury exposure and contamination. Calling a teacher by their first name wasn't unusual, especially in progressive schools. Many educators embraced a more casual, friendly approach to teaching, preferring to be addressed by their first name rather than the traditional Mr. or Mrs. This was especially common in small towns, where teachers and students often knew each other outside of school. In some schools, particularly those influenced by counterculture movements, strict formalities were seen as outdated. However, in more conservative regions, first name use was still frowned upon. Over time, as schools emphasized discipline and professionalism, addressing teachers formally became the norm. Today, calling a teacher by their first name is widely considered disrespectful in most schools. In the 70s, some people let their dogs roam the neighborhood freely. Why did they do so? Let's check it out. In the 1970s, it was perfectly normal for dogs to roam neighborhoods freely without leashes, collars, or supervision. Most pet owners simply let their dogs out in the morning, and they would spend the day exploring, playing with other neighborhood dogs, or even wandering into local shops before returning home by evening. There were no leash laws in many places, and dog parks weren't necessary because the entire town was essentially a playground. Stray dogs were common, and people generally didn't panic if an unfamiliar dog showed up on their porch. As cities grew and concerns over dog bites, traffic accidents, and lost pets increased, leash laws and pet regulations were enforced. Today, letting a dog roam freely can lead to fines, impoundment, and legal trouble. Cracking open a fire hydrant on a hot summer day was a beloved tradition in many neighborhoods, especially in big cities. Kids and even some adults would run through the powerful streams of water, treating the flooded streets like a giant water park. It was an easy way to cool off when air conditioning wasn't as widespread. Some fire departments even turned a blind eye, allowing it as long as it didn't interfere with emergencies. As cities grew and water conservation became a concern, laws were enforced to prevent unauthorized hydrant use, making it illegal and punishable by fines. Some cities now offer sprinkler caps, but street water parties are mostly a thing of the past. Seatbelt use was more of a suggestion than a rule, and most people simply ignored them. Cars didn't come with backseat seatbelts as standard, and wearing one in the front was rare. Families often crammed into a single vehicle with kids sitting on laps, lying in the back seat, or even standing between the front seats. Station wagons and vans turned into makeshift playgrounds, with children rolling around freely or napping on blankets in the cargo area. Pickup trucks were packed with passengers in the truck bed, enjoying the breeze. As traffic fatalities rose, governments enforced strict seatbelt laws, making them mandatory in most countries with heavy fines for non-compliance. Modern cars now include advanced safety features, reducing reckless travel. Why did some 70s people prefer running across the tarmac to catch a flight? In the 1970s, airports were far more relaxed, and missing a flight didn't mean the end of the world. If you arrived late, you could simply run across the tarmac and board the plane directly, sometimes waving at the flight attendants to hold the door. Smaller airports had few security barriers, and passengers could casually walk from the terminal to the aircraft without strict checkpoints. It wasn't uncommon for travelers to hop off one plane and jog to another without going through security again. However, as hijackings and security concerns increased, strict boarding procedures were introduced. Today, stepping onto the tarmac unauthorized would trigger an immediate security response. Modern airports have tight controls, with locked jet bridges, restricted zones, and security personnel ensuring that no one dashes across the runway in a last-minute attempt to board. Buying a house was a much simpler process compared to today's strict financial regulations. Many banks and lenders operated on trust, offering home loans with minimal paperwork and, in some cases, even a simple handshake deal. Credit scores weren't the all-important factor they are today, and many people secured mortgages without extensive background checks or income verification. Smaller community banks and local lenders made decisions based on personal relationships rather than strict financial metrics. Home prices were also significantly lower, making home ownership more accessible. However, as financial fraud and loan defaults increased, stricter lending policies were introduced. Today, buying a home requires thorough credit checks, proof of income, tax returns, and debt-to-income assessments. Smoking indoors was so normal that even hospitals, places meant for healing, were filled with cigarette smoke. Patients, visitors, doctors, and nurses routinely smoked in hospital rooms, waiting areas, and even maternity wards. It wasn't unusual to see a new father celebrating his child's birth with a cigarette right next to his newborn. Ashtrays were common fixtures in hospital hallways, and some doctors even smoked while making rounds. The dangers of secondhand smoke weren't widely recognized, and some cigarette brands were even marketed as healthy or doctor recommended. However, as research linked smoking to severe health risks, smoking bans gradually took effect. By the late 1980s and 1990s, most hospitals had implemented strict no-smoking policies. Today, even smoking near hospital entrances is often prohibited, with designated smoking areas placed far from patient care zones.
Secondhand smoke can be invisible and contains a lethal cocktail of over 4,000 irritants, toxins, and cancer-causing substances.
Drinking straight from the garden hose was a childhood rite of passage. After hours of playing outside, kids would simply turn on the hose and gulp down water without a second thought. No one was worried about bacteria, lead, or chemicals leaching from the rubber hose. It was often seen as a refreshing, convenient way to hydrate, far easier than running inside for a glass. Parents didn't caution against it, and bottled water wasn't yet a household staple. However, as concerns about water contamination, lead exposure, and hose material safety grew, health experts began advising against it. Today, some areas even have regulations discouraging it due to potential exposure to harmful substances. While still possible, drinking from a hose is now widely considered unsanitary, with most people opting for filtered or bottled water instead. Candy was packed with artificial colors, preservatives, and chemicals that would raise eyebrows today. Brightly colored treats like red, blue, and yellow-dyed candies contained additives such as red dye number 2, which was later banned due to cancer concerns. Many sweets also had cyclamates, an artificial sweetener outlawed in the United States in 1969 over health risks. Some chewing gums contain butylated hydroxytoluene, BHT, and butylated hydroxyanisole, BHA, preservatives now restricted in various countries. Despite questionable ingredients, kids happily devoured these candies without worry. Labels didn't list every chemical, and food safety regulations were far more relaxed. Over time, research linked many of these additives to health risks, leading to stricter regulations. Back in the 70s, spanking or smacking a child in public was seen as a routine form of discipline, and few people questioned it.
If you're going to spank your kids in public, I'm going to record it, and I'm going to report you. What? You can't spank your kids with an open hand on their bottom in public. You can't do it. I'll report you.
Parents, teachers, and even strangers felt comfortable administering a quick slap on the wrist or a firm swat to correct misbehavior. If a child acted out in a grocery store or restaurant, a parent might spank them on the spot, often met with nods of approval rather than judgment. Schools also embraced corporal punishment. with teachers using paddles without hesitation. However, as research on child psychology and abuse awareness grew, attitudes toward physical discipline shifted. Today, public spanking can lead to accusations of child abuse, intervention from bystanders, and even involvement from Child Protective Services, CPS. Many countries have outright banned corporal punishment. In the 70s and 80s, recording television shows on a video home system, VHS, was a common practice, and no one thought twice about it. Families would tape their favorite programs using bulky video cassette recorders, creating personal archives of movies, sitcoms, and cartoons.
Put in a pre-recorded movie, and this Panasonic gives you hi-fi sound through your stereo. Sound so far superior to ordinary TV.
It was also common to lend or copy tapes for friends, essentially sharing content freely. Video rental stores even had sections dedicated to home-recorded VHS tapes. At the time, copyright enforcement was lax, and media companies hadn't fully grasped the impact of home recording. However, as the entertainment industry grew and digital piracy became a concern, laws tightened. Today, recording and distributing copyrighted content without permission is considered piracy, with heavy fines and legal consequences. Streaming services and digital rights management, DRM, now prevent easy copying, making the once simple act of sharing a television show a legal gray area.